Jane Austen lived during one of the most exciting eras in British history. It was a time of strife and transition, a period that would transform the British position on the geopolitical stage. For generations, the British Empire had been one of the most powerful empires in the world. The signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, the year after Austen's birth, marked the beginning of the American Revolution, which would then be followed by the Napoleonic Wars of 1793 to 1815. Upon the Americans' victory over the British, the empire lost a colony that had previously proved to be an economic powerhouse for them, and was quickly losing its position with France, England's chief rival, as well. For most of Austen's young life, Britain was engaged nearly ceaselessly in wars with America and France. As a natural result of war, there was great financial instability back home. These 20 years were extremely volatile for England, and were followed by the Regency period. The Regency officially began in 1811. King George III, who presided over the empire through the American Revolution and most of the duration of the Napoleonic Wars, began suffering from mental illness later in his life. Doctors were baffled by the deterioration of his mental capacities, and it was determined that a regent must replace him. His son, George, the Prince of Wales, was selected to rule England as regent. The regency lasted until 1820, when the Prince Regent was crowned as George IV upon his father's death. Though the regency only lasted 9 years, the regency period has come to refer more generally to the early 19th century before Victoria came to power in 1837. George IV, both as Prince Regent and as King, poured funds into the arts and sciences. It was also the beginning of industrialization in England, although it would not peak until Victoria's reign. Though Austen's world portrays a genteel perspective of the Regency period, poverty was quite prevalent during this time. A third of the population lived on the verge of starvation. Food riots were rampant, and there was much unrest, exacerbated by Luddite protesters who despised the industrialization of England. Having spent the prior 2 decades engaged in a near constant state of war, the government violently repressed the protests. As fear of revolution spread throughout the country, freedom of speech was crushed in response. This is the historical context in which Austen lived and wrote. Austen's brother Henry was in the Oxfordshire militia, and, though Pride and Prejudice conveys peaceful countryside living, the presence of Wickham and the militia are markedly true to history. An estimated 250,000 troops served in the regular army during the war with France, which affected every level of British society. Officers and volunteers mobilized in militias for what was thought to be an impending invasion by France's Napoleon. Though Austen did not steep her readers in the terror experienced during this period, the near constant presence of the military officers in her texts reflects the times. In addition to Britain's changing position on the world stage, the social landscape at home was also in transition. Austen's novels tend to portray the gentry, defined as a broad social class that includes those who owned land, the country or landed gentry, as well as the professional classes, lawyers, doctors, and clergy, who did not. Today, this class would be considered bourgeoisie. Darcy, Bingley, and Mr. Bennet are all examples of landed gentry, although Darcy and Bingley are considerably wealthier than Mr. Bennet. Austen herself was part of this class. Elizabeth's relatives, the Gardiners, are examples of the professional class. This was the most influential class in Austen's time, and this can be attributed to the matter of land ownership. During the 1700s and 1800s, English land tended to be concentrated in the hands of a few. This was due to inheritance laws that encouraged the consolidation and expansion of estates. Austen frequently refers to certain properties being entails. Longbourn, in Pride and Prejudice, as well as Norland Park, in Sense and Sensibility, are both entailed properties. Through entails, wealth and property were funneled to the male children, or male relatives. Instead of dividing the property among family members, one male would have the exclusive rights to all, and other members of the family would have to rely on his generosity. In Pride and Prejudice, much of the plot revolves around the entailment of Longbourn, as we will soon see. Such vast country estates, such as the ones Darcy and Bingley own, served as symbols of wealth and power for the landed gentry. As one can guess, such inheritance laws tended to leave women in the lurch. Land ownership and inheritance is closely tied with courtship and marriage during this period. Women could not inherit, they were dependent on marriage for financial survival. In addition, as the landed gentry became increasingly focused on accumulating wealth, the status of daughters in the family changed. They became a means through which a family could attain greater wealth. How? Through an advantageous marriage, of course. All of these things made courtship the central focus of women's lives, as we will witness in Pride and Prejudice. Women had high behavioral expectations as well. Refinement is praised constantly throughout Pride and Prejudice, just as certain individuals' lack of refinement is scorned. As stated by Caroline Bingley, a woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And besides all this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved. This assertion reflects the demands of women during this period, and Austen's Elizabeth is quick to note its ridiculousness, replying, "I never saw such a woman. I never saw such capacity and taste and application and elegance as you describe, united." Given these expectations, one might be surprised by Elizabeth's personality. With such societal pressures, shouldn't she be meek as a mouse? This is answered by Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women, published in 1792, which argued that women should be treated as the rational equals of men. Her essential argument was that women should be educated because they were the primary educators of their children. Uneducated teachers lead to uneducated children. It was, therefore, best for all if women were educated. Elizabeth Bennet is an example of this sort of rational being that Wollstonecraft envisioned. Though she is, in a sense, crippled by the inheritance laws and dependent on an advantageous marriage, she still demonstrates intellectual and moral independence, which is frequently witnessed in her private thoughts and interactions with others. Keep all of this in mind as we progress through Pride and Prejudice, Austen's most famous and beloved novel, and enjoy!